If you want to learn how to take your vocals from this,
like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure.
to this,
Like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure.
then this is the video for you. So I feel like a really cool aspect of mixing vocals is being able to add different types of effects and sounds to your vocals. So in this video, I'm gonna be showing you how to make your vocals sound like they're distant or far away. So let's get right to it. So I'm gonna be working in FL Studio, but these same principles will work in any other sort of DAW like Pro Tools, Logic, and anything like that. So this is a song that I recorded a while back, and this is what the lead vocal sounds like with the beat.
You speak to me like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not turning around.
So yeah, it's a pretty cool song, but I felt like it needed more depth in the vocal. So I recorded these backup vocals, and this is the raw recording.
Like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not.
So yeah, that's what it sounds like. But what I want to do for the mix of this track is make it sound like it's distant or far away. So I'll show you exactly how I do that. Let's go. So first thing you're going to want to do is make a completely separate track from your lead vocal. So I'm just going to rename this track Distant for the distant vocals. And then the track right next to it is where the mix is going to go. So I'm just going to put mix, and then make sure that the recording track is routed to the mix track. So inside of the mix track right here, the first thing I'm going to do is just add an EQ. So this first EQ is just going to be a subtractive EQ that's taking out most of the frequencies that I don't want inside of this recording right here. So the first thing that I'm going to do with this EQ here is cut out most of the low frequencies. Cutting out these low frequencies is a big contributor when it comes to making the vocal sound like it's far away. So right here, I'm going to do is make a high pass and then drag it in. I'm going to just play the vocal behind it to make sure it sounds good.
Like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure.
So I think for my voice specifically, around 200 hertz is good to cut out. I don't want to get it too far up because I don't want it to sound too much like it's coming from like a telephone or something, but I don't want it too low because I don't want it to sound intimate and close.
Like it's before.
So yeah, maybe around 200 hertz is good for me. And then the next thing I'm going to do with this EQ is just with these other knobs right here, I'm going to sweep through the frequencies and find ones that I just don't like, and I'm just going to cut those out.
Like it's before.
So you can hear that weird frequency right here. All I'm going to do is just drag it down just a little bit. This will just subtract it out from the mix. So I'm just going to keep doing this process.
Like it's before.
So what I'm going to do for the high end, and this is really important in making a distant vocal, is I'm going to drop it down a little bit. What this is going to do is just lose that clarity that you would get if you were talking to somebody like face to face. So it'll make him sound more distant. So right here, I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. So obviously you don't want to crush it down too much, but just enough so you lose a little bit of that high end clarity that you would have if you were talking to somebody face to face.
Like it's before.
So I think that's pretty good right there. And then for the high to mid area, I'm just going to boost it a little bit just to gain a tiny bit of clarity because I don't want it to sound too muffled.
Like it's before.
So I think this EQ sounds pretty good. Also, one thing I did forget to mention is if you do want to, you can add an auto-tune. For this one, I'm going to because I did it on the main track. But all you're going to do is just open up your auto-tune plugin and just figure out the key of your song and enter it into the plugin, and it should sound great. Okay, so after the auto-tune and EQ, the vocal went from this
like it's before.
to this.
Like it's before, that's the way I know you're.
So already a pretty big difference just from that EQ and auto-tune. The next thing I'm going to add to this vocal is a compressor. So as this is a background vocal, it doesn't need too much compression as it won't be very loud in the mix. However, it's always good to add a compressor just to make sure your levels are all the same. So yeah, like I said before, I'm not going to compress it too much. All I'm going to do is bring the ratio to about 3:1 probably, and then just play with the threshold until it starts to affect the vocal.
Sure, I'm not.
So it seems at about negative 15.3 decibels is good for this vocal. And then I'm just going to turn the gain up probably only like 1 decibel just to account for some of the volume that we lost. And then for attack and release, I don't want them too high because I don't want it to hold onto the vocal for too long. So maybe about right here is good. Now this compressor isn't supposed to do too much. All it's doing is really just making sure the levels of volume of the vocal are all the same. So after the compressor, the vocal went from this to this. So it's not doing too much, but as you can hear, some of the parts where I'm kind of getting a little bit louder with my voice, it does turn it down a little bit, like right here. As you can hear, when I sing, "You're the one I want," it turns down that loud part ever so slightly, but it does help a lot in just balancing out the mix. Okay, so I'm going to keep this mix really simple. So the last 2 things I'm going to add are a limiter and a de-esser. So what this limiter is going to do is it's kind of like the opposite of a compressor. Instead of turning out the highest levels of volume, it's going to turn out the lowest levels of volume. So any background noise or low rumble that's in the background that made its way into the mix is going to get completely cut out. So all I'm going to do is create a noise gate right here and turn the threshold up enough so that it cuts out those background noises, but not too much to the point where it cuts out some of the vocal. See, so when I turn it up too much, it cuts out a lot of that vocal, as you can hear. So I'm going to turn it down to about probably only like 10%. That's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. So I'm going to turn the threshold down to about here, and that's really all you need for the noise gate. And then, like I said before, I'm going to add this de-esser. All this is going to do is turn down those really harsh and high S's, T's, and P's that are just unpleasant to listen to. So I'm going to go to this preset de-esser narrowband and just turn this down just a little bit. Now obviously these harsh sounds won't be too prevalent in the mix as they're going to be kind of in the background, but it's still good to add this just to balance the mix out a little bit. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. So after all those plugins, the vocal went from this like is before. That's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not to this like is before. That's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not. Okay, now comes the fun part, the reverb. Okay, all I'm going to do is create a separate track for the reverb right here. So I'm just going to name this track reverb. And then on this track, I'm going to add my reverb plugin. So what I'm going to do is turn the wet like all the way up because this will be a very ambient and far away sound. So yeah, I'm just going to turn the wet all the way up. And then for the decay, I'm going to turn it up a little bit as this will make the reverb last for longer. Again, it's giving a more ambient and distant sound. So to get this reverb effect on your mix, all you're going to do is route your mix vocal to the reverb and then just play it back. Like it's before, that's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not. So as you can see, combining all that mixing that we did with the reverb really gives a distant and far away feel for the vocal. And then combining this back with the lead vocal sounds very cool. You speak to me like it's before. That's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not turning around. So yeah, that's going to be it for the mix. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like. Also, drop your artist name in the comments because I want to hear the type of mixes you guys come up with. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. You speak to me like it's before. That's the way I know you're the one I want for sure. I'm not turning around. It came too easy. Like I said before, I see